Life in Law. A Human Guide to Birth, Growth, Maturity, and Death. Foreword. Why humanity fears its own life cycle. Humanity's fear of its own life cycle does not arise from life itself, but from a long-standing refusal to understand life lawfully. Birth, growth, maturity, aging, and death are not mysterious forces acting upon human beings, they are orderly stages governed by immutable laws. Yet modern humanity approaches these stages with superstition, denial, sentimentality, or avoidance. What should be understood soberly has been wrapped in fear, fantasy, or false comfort. At the root of this fear lies a single error. The human being no longer sees life as a task of responsibility, but as a personal story meant for pleasure, validation, or escape. When life is reduced to emotion or ambition, its lawful rhythm becomes threatening. The Grail Message restores clarity by removing illusion and returning attention to the simple, unalterable laws that govern existence. Why birth and death are surrounded by superstition and denial. Birth and death stand at the two visible boundaries of earthly life, and both have been burdened with meanings that do not belong to them. Birth is often treated as either a miracle without responsibility or a random accident without purpose. Death, in contrast, is surrounded by fear images, romantic longing, or absolute denial. Superstition arises where recognition of law is absent. Instead of seeing birth as a conscious opportunity within lawful order, humanity invents stories, fate, punishment, reward, divine favoritism, none of which withstand sober examination. Similarly, death is transformed into either a horror to be postponed at all costs or a mystical gateway promising sudden transformation without effort. Both views remove responsibility from the living human being. Denial plays an equally destructive role. Many avoid speaking of death, preparing for it, or even acknowledging its certainty. This avoidance does not remove death, it only strips life of seriousness. When death is denied, life becomes shallow. When birth is romanticized, development is neglected. In both cases, the human being escapes recognition of why these events occur and what they demand. The Grail Message cuts through superstition and denial by showing that birth and death are neither arbitrary nor dramatic. They are lawful transitions, nothing more, nothing less. Fear dissolves when illusion is removed. Growth misunderstood as accumulation instead of unfolding. One of humanity's most damaging misconceptions is the belief that growth means accumulation. More knowledge, more wealth, more influence, more experiences. Time passes, possessions increase, titles are acquired, and this is called development. Yet inwardly, many remain unchanged, reactive, dependent, and immature. True growth is unfolding, not accumulation. It is the gradual clarification of perception, the refinement of will, and the alignment of thought, word, and deed with law. Growth cannot be measured by age or achievement, it is measured by responsibility, sobriety, and inner stability. Because this distinction is ignored, many humans grow older without growing up. They mistake movement for progress and activity for development. When life later demands maturity, through limitation, loss, or transition, they are unprepared. What should have been a natural ripening becomes crisis, bitterness, or fear. The Grail Message restores the correct measure of growth. It teaches that every life phase carries specific responsibilities, and that neglecting inner unfolding leads inevitably to imbalance. Growth is not optional, it is demanded by law. Ignoring it does not delay consequence, it accelerates it. Death feared because responsibility is avoided. Death is feared not because it is unknown, but because life has been lived evasively. The human being who has avoided self-examination, postponed correction, and clung to illusion senses, often unconsciously, that death will remove all masks. This anticipation produces fear. Death itself does not punish, judge, or transform. It reveals. What the human being has become inwardly is carried forward unchanged. Therefore, fear of death is always fear of oneself, fear of what has been neglected, distorted, or unresolved. Those who live responsibly do not fear death. They may respect it, prepare for it, and accept it, but they do not flee from it inwardly. Peace before death is not created at the end of life, it is built through decades of upright living. The Grail Message removes the false hope of last-minute correction, and equally removes fear-based judgment. It shows that death is simply the closing of one phase and the continuation of responsibility in another form. When responsibility is embraced during life, death loses its terror entirely. The Grail Message is light on life's lawful rhythm. The Grail Message does not introduce new beliefs, it restores recognition of what has always governed existence. It places human life back into its lawful rhythm, incarnation for development, growth through responsibility, maturity through alignment, and death as orderly transition. This light is uncomfortable for those who seek escape, fantasy, or exemption. But for the earnest seeker, it is liberating. It removes fear by replacing mystery with clarity. It removes guilt by replacing judgment with law. It removes confusion by showing that life is neither chaos nor arbitrary fate, but structured opportunity. In this light, the life cycle no longer appears as a threat. Birth is recognized as responsibility. Growth is seen as obligation. Maturity becomes the goal. Death is accepted as completion, not catastrophe. This book proceeds in that same rhythm, clarifying where confusion reigns, correcting where distortion has been normalized, and enlightening without coercion. It does not promise comfort. It offers something greater: truth, sobriety, and the dignity of a life consciously lived within the laws of creation. Introduction. What people think life and death are. Human understanding of life and death has drifted far from clarity. Instead of sober recognition of lawful processes, humanity has filled the unknown with imagination, emotion, fear, and convenience. What should be approached with seriousness and responsibility has been reduced to belief systems, social conventions, or personal opinions. As a result, life is often lived without direction, and death is either feared excessively or dismissed entirely. The Grail Message confronts these misconceptions not by offering consolation or threat, but by restoring lawful understanding. Only when false ideas are stripped away can the human being recognize what life truly demands and what death truly reveals. Birth as accident or destiny. Many view birth in one of two extremes, as a meaningless accident or as a fixed destiny imposed from outside. In the first view, life is random, an outcome of biology without deeper responsibility. In the second, life is predetermined, something already decided, excusing the individual from conscious effort. Both views remove accountability. If birth is seen as accident, life becomes something to endure or exploit, not a task to fulfill. If birth is seen as destiny, responsibility is shifted outward, to fate, God, ancestors, or circumstance. In both cases, the human being avoids asking the essential question: why am I here, and what is demanded of me now? The Grail Message restores balance by showing that birth is neither accident nor blind destiny. It is opportunity within law. Conditions of birth, family, nation, abilities, limitations, are not arbitrary, but neither do they absolve responsibility. They form the working ground upon which the human being must consciously unfold. Birth begins responsibility. It does not define outcome. Growth confused with aging. Another widespread error is the belief that growth happens automatically with time. Years pass, bodies change, experiences accumulate, and this is called growing up. Yet inwardly, many remain reactive, dependent, and unexamined long after physical maturity. Aging is biological, growth is inner. True growth is the development of perception, responsibility, and self-discipline. It is the ability to observe oneself honestly, to correct error without excuse, and to act in alignment with law rather than impulse. Aging without growth produces frustration, entitlement, and fear, especially when life demands maturity that has not been cultivated. Because society rewards activity and appearance rather than inner development, this confusion persists. The Grail Message corrects it by making clear that time grants no maturity. Growth must be earned through conscious effort. Where growth is neglected, life eventually forces recognition, often through suffering that could have been avoided. Maturity mistaken for authority or success. Many equate maturity with external markers, leadership roles, financial success, social status, or influence over others. Yet authority and success can exist without inner stability. Power does not equal wisdom, and visibility does not equal maturity. True maturity is quiet. It expresses itself through calm clarity, consistency, and responsibility. The mature human being does not need to dominate, impress, or justify. He stands firmly within himself and therefore radiates reliability to others. When maturity is misunderstood, society elevates the unripe and ignores the inwardly stable. This leads to systems ruled by insecurity, pride, and reaction rather than clarity. The Grail Message restores the lawful definition of maturity, the state in which thought, feeling, and action are harmonized under responsibility. Without this, no position or achievement has real value. Death seen as end, punishment, or escape. Death is perhaps the most distorted concept of all. Some see it as annihilation, the final end that renders life meaningless. Others see it as punishment, judgment, or reward administered suddenly and emotionally. Still others treat death as escape, relief from responsibility, suffering, or consequence. None of these views withstand lawful recognition. Death does not end life, it ends a phase. It does not punish, it reveals. It does not rescue, it continues what has been cultivated. The character, clarity, or confusion a human being carries inwardly does not dissolve at death. It becomes more visible. Fear of death arises when life has been lived evasively. Romanticizing death arises when life has been burdensome. Both are signs of misunderstanding. The Grail Message removes fantasy and fear by showing death as orderly transition governed by the same laws that govern life. There are no exceptions, no sudden transformations, no shortcuts. Why misunderstanding the life cycle cripples the soul? When birth, growth, maturity, and death are misunderstood, the human being loses orientation. Life becomes a series of reactions rather than a conscious task. Responsibility is postponed. Correction is avoided. Inner development stagnates. This crippling does not occur suddenly, it unfolds gradually. The soul becomes rigid instead of flexible, defensive instead of receptive. Fear replaces clarity, and belief replaces recognition. By the time life demands transition, through aging, limitation, or death, the human being feels unprepared and threatened. The Grail Message addresses this not with warning, but with illumination. It shows that every phase of life is meaningful only when lived consciously. Nothing is added at the end that was not cultivated during the journey. This introduction therefore marks a turning point, away from what people think life and death are, and toward what they actually are under law. Only through such recognition can the human being recover dignity, purpose, and peace, both in living and in dying. Part 1. The Law of Earthly Incarnation. Why human beings are born at all. Earthly incarnation is one of the most misunderstood realities of human existence. It has been wrapped in mythology, sentimentality, fear, and speculation, while its lawful nature has been largely ignored. As a result, human beings arrive on Earth without clarity about why they are here, what is expected of them, and how their life circumstances are connected to their inner state. The Grail Message restores sobriety to this subject. It shows incarnation not as mystery to be worshipped nor fate to be endured, but as a precise opportunity within creation's laws. Birth is purposeful, ordered, and responsibility-laden. Nothing about it is casual. Chapter 1. Earthly birth is a conscious opportunity. Birth is not chance, reward, or punishment. Humanity often interprets birth emotionally. A fortunate birth is seen as reward, a difficult one as punishment. Others dismiss birth as biological chance, the accidental outcome of reproduction. Both interpretations remove law and therefore distort responsibility. Birth is neither chance nor judgment. It is opportunity. No soul enters earthly life without lawful cause. Yet this cause is not moral sentencing nor blind randomness. It is alignment. The soul enters conditions that correspond to its inner state, its degree of readiness, and the experiences necessary for further development. To call birth punishment is to imagine a judging deity acting emotionally. To call it chance is to deny order altogether. The Grail Message removes both errors by showing birth as lawful placement within creation, where opportunity and responsibility meet. Why incarnation follows inner readiness. Earthly life is dense, demanding, and limiting. It requires resilience, discipline, and the capacity to act consciously under resistance. Therefore, incarnation is not forced upon an unready soul, nor is it granted arbitrarily. Readiness does not mean perfection. It means sufficient inner firmness to engage earthly conditions meaningfully. Where readiness is lacking, incarnation would result only in further distortion rather than growth. This explains why individuals differ so greatly in capacity, inclination, and challenge. These differences are not injustice, they are correspondence. What a human being faces outwardly mirrors what must be unfolded inwardly. The lawful connection between soul state and birth conditions. Family, culture, body, time, and place are not accidental backdrops. They form the precise environment necessary for encounter, recognition, and correction. Each condition offers resistance or support according to what is required for development. To rebel against one's birth conditions is therefore to rebel against opportunity itself. Acceptance does not mean passive endurance, it means sober engagement. Only from acceptance can transformation arise. Thus, birth is the opening of a task, not a verdict, not a lottery, but an invitation to conscious participation in law. Chapter 2. The body is instrument, not identity. Why the body is temporary by design. The human body is not meant to last indefinitely. Its transience is not a flaw but a necessity. Through its limitations, fatigue, aging, vulnerability, it reminds the human being that life's purpose does not lie in physical permanence. The body is a tool for experience, action, and learning within material density. Like all tools, it serves a function and is then laid aside. To identify with the tool is to misunderstand its purpose. The Grail Message clarifies that the soul uses the body, it does not originate from it. When this order is reversed, confusion dominates life. The error of body-centered living. Modern humanity increasingly defines itself through the body, appearance, pleasure, health, strength, or survival. This inversion leads to fear of aging, obsession with youth, and terror of death. Body-centered living narrows perception. Decisions are made for comfort rather than correctness, for pleasure rather than growth. Over time, inner development stagnates while outer activity increases. Such living does not honor the body, it abuses it by forcing it to carry the burden of identity. How misuse of the body distorts development. When the body is treated as identity, it becomes overstimulated, neglected, or idolized. This misuse dulls perception and weakens will. Habits form that bind rather than serve. Correct use of the body is neither indulgence nor denial. It is respect through order. When the body is treated as instrument, it supports clarity instead of obscuring it. Where misuse dominates, development becomes distorted and the opportunity of incarnation is squandered. Chapter 3. Childhood. The phase of imprint. Why early years are decisive. Childhood is not merely preparation for adulthood, it is a critical phase of imprinting. During early years, perception is open, boundaries are fluid, and impressions sink deeply. What is absorbed during this phase does not remain on the surface. It shapes reactions, expectations, and self-image far into later life. Because of this openness, childhood is not a neutral period, it is formative. Sensitivity, imitation, and responsibility of environment. Children learn less from instruction than from atmosphere. They imitate tone, behavior, and inner attitude long before they understand words. Conflict, dishonesty, fear, or disorder in the environment imprint silently but powerfully. This places immense responsibility on parents and society. The child does not yet choose, it absorbs. Where guidance is absent, distortion enters unnoticed. The Grail Message removes sentimental views of childhood and replaces them with sober recognition of responsibility. How early distortions echo through life. Uncorrected early impressions often reappear later as fear, rigidity, or confusion. Adults may struggle for decades with patterns formed before conscious memory. These echoes are not punishment. They are consequences of imprint. Recognition allows correction, but denial prolongs bondage. Understanding childhood imprint is therefore essential for lawful self-examination. Chapter 4. The Role of Parents and Society. Parenthood is stewardship, not ownership. Parents do not own their children. They are entrusted with care, guidance, and protection during a phase of vulnerability. Ownership thinking leads to control, projection, and emotional entanglement. Stewardship requires humility. The parent must recognize that the child carries its own task and qualities. Guidance must support unfolding, not impose identity. Where stewardship is absent, the child's path is obscured. The danger of conditioning without guidance. Conditioning teaches conformity. Guidance teaches recognition. Conditioning produces obedience or rebellion. Guidance cultivates responsibility. Societies often condition through fear, reward, ideology, or expectation. Without guidance, the individual grows outwardly functional but inwardly empty. The Grail Message emphasizes that guidance must awaken conscience, not replace it. How societies cripple or support unfolding. A society that values appearance over character, success over responsibility, and comfort over truth cripples development. One that values clarity, accountability, and service supports unfolding. Societies are not neutral. They shape the soil in which souls attempt to grow. Each individual must eventually recognize where society supports law, and where it does not. Chapter 5. Why every birth carries responsibility. No soul arrives empty. Every human being arrives with latent qualities, tendencies, and capacities. Nothing is blank. What is latent must be unfolded consciously, otherwise, it stagnates or distorts. To deny this is to deny responsibility. Latent qualities seeking expression. Talents, inclinations, and inner strengths seek expression through action. Suppression or misuse of these qualities leads to frustration and imbalance. Their lawful use leads to fulfillment and contribution. Recognition is required to distinguish unfolding from indulgence. Why excuses about background fail before law. While background influences development, it does not excuse refusal to grow. Law recognizes conditions, but demands response. At a certain point, every human being must take responsibility for correction regardless of origin. Excuses delay growth. Recognition enables it. Thus, earthly incarnation begins with responsibility and ends with accountability, not imposed from outside, but inherent in law. Birth opens the task. What is done with it determines everything that follows. Part 2. Growth. The most misunderstood phase. Why many age without ever growing. Among all phases of human life, growth is the most misinterpreted. Humanity largely equates growth with time, accumulation, achievement, or expansion. Yet many who grow older do not grow deeper, clearer, or freer. Years pass, but inner posture remains unchanged. Experience accumulates, but wisdom does not emerge. The Grail Message brings sobriety to this confusion. Growth is not automatic. It is not guaranteed by survival, education, or success. Growth is a conscious process of inner alignment with law. Where this alignment is absent, time merely hardens errors instead of refining character. Chapter 6. Growth is inner alignment, not time. Why years do not equal development. Time is neutral. It offers opportunity, but it does not ensure use. A human being may live many decades repeating the same inner attitudes, fear, pride, resentment, evasion, without transformation. True development requires movement inward, not merely forward in years. Without reflection, correction, and conscious decision, time only reinforces habit. This explains why some remain childish in reaction despite advanced age, while others mature early through earnest engagement with life. Growth begins only where awareness begins. Growth is refinement of will and perception. Inner growth is the refinement of will, learning to choose what is right rather than what is comfortable, and the sharpening of perception, learning to see oneself in reality without distortion. This refinement does not happen suddenly. It unfolds through repeated recognition, error, correction, and renewed effort. Each challenge tests whether the will bends toward truth or retreats into excuse. Perception grows clearer as self-deception diminishes. Where self-justification dominates, growth halts. The tragedy of arrested inner growth. Arrested growth is tragic because it is often invisible to the one affected. Outer functionality masks inner stagnation. Such individuals may appear successful, articulate, or respected, yet remain inwardly rigid and unexamined. This rigidity breeds fear of change, hostility toward correction, and resistance to truth. Life then becomes repetitive rather than unfolding. What was meant to be development becomes endurance. Chapter 7. Education versus formation. Knowledge without character. Education transmits information. Formation shapes being. Modern humanity has elevated education while neglecting formation, producing knowledgeable individuals lacking inner compass. Knowledge alone does not restrain ego, awaken conscience, or refine will. Without character, intelligence becomes a tool for self-interest rather than service. The Grail Message makes clear, knowledge is valuable only when governed by inner discipline. Intelligence without wisdom. Intelligence analyzes, wisdom aligns. Intelligence can justify error as easily as truth. Wisdom recognizes consequence and law. An intelligent mind without wisdom often becomes arrogant, dismissive, or manipulative. It mistakes cleverness for clarity and argument for truth. Wisdom arises not from accumulation of facts but from lived recognition. Why schooling cannot replace inner discipline. No institution can perform inner work on behalf of the individual. Schools can teach skills and concepts, but discipline of thought, honesty with oneself, and responsibility for action must be chosen. Where inner discipline is absent, education amplifies imbalance rather than correcting it. Growth demands self-governance, not merely instruction. Chapter 8. Desire, Struggle, and Choice. Why resistance is necessary. Resistance is not cruelty, it is refinement. Without resistance, will remains untested, perception remains dull, and capacity remains latent. Every obstacle reveals something: impatience, fear, strength, or clarity. Resistance exposes what comfort conceals. This is why a life without challenge rarely produces depth. How struggle sharpens clarity. Struggle forces choice. It compels the individual to confront priorities, values, and motives. In struggle, illusions collapse and essentials emerge. Clarity born of struggle is durable because it is earned. It cannot be borrowed or inherited. Where struggle is avoided at all costs, growth is delayed. When desire becomes derailment. Desire can energize growth or derail it. When desire aligns with law, it propels effort. When it seeks gratification without responsibility, it blinds perception. Unchecked desire demands immediate fulfillment and resists correction. Over time, it replaces purpose with appetite. Growth then yields to consumption. Chapter 9. The Illusion of Progress. Career, wealth, and status as false milestones. Society celebrates progress through titles, income, influence, and visibility. While these may reflect outer movement, they do not necessarily indicate inner growth. One may rise socially while descending inwardly. The illusion of progress is strongest when comparison replaces self-examination. The Grail Message cautions against confusing motion with direction. Why outward success can hide inner decay. Success often reduces friction. Reduced friction diminishes self-questioning. Without challenge, arrogance can grow unnoticed, empathy can fade, and conscience can be silenced. Inner decay is quiet. It hides behind efficiency and applause. Only honesty can expose it. Measuring growth lawfully. Lawful measurement of growth asks different questions. Has perception become clearer? Has responsibility increased? Has the will become steadier? Has consideration for others deepened? Where these qualities mature, growth is present regardless of outer circumstance. Chapter 10. Responsibility is the axis of growth. Avoidance is regression. Avoidance halts growth immediately. Every evaded responsibility weakens inner structure. Over time, avoidance becomes habit, and habit becomes character. Regression does not always look like collapse, it often appears as stagnation masked by routine. Ownership of consequences. To own consequences is to accept law. It does not mean self-condemnation but recognition. Through ownership, correction becomes possible. Those who blame circumstances, people, or fate surrender their capacity to grow. Growth ends where responsibility ends. There is a precise boundary beyond which growth cannot proceed: refusal of responsibility. No amount of knowledge, effort, or suffering can substitute for it. Growth resumes the moment responsibility is reclaimed. Thus, responsibility is not a burden, it is the axis upon which freedom and development turn. In this phase of life, humanity's greatest error is assuming that growth happens automatically. It does not. Growth is a conscious, disciplined alignment with law. Where this alignment is chosen, life unfolds. Where it is neglected, time merely passes. Part 3. Maturity, the rarest human state. What true adulthood really means. Maturity is commonly mistaken for age, authority, achievement, or social status. Yet true maturity is independent of years lived or positions held. It is an inner state, rare, quiet, and unmistakable when present. Many reach physical adulthood, few reach inner adulthood. The Grail Message clarifies maturity as the stage where inner growth has stabilized, where the will stands upright without strain, and where perception is no longer governed by fear, vanity, or reaction. Maturity is not loud. It does not demand recognition. It radiates steadiness. Chapter 11. Maturity is inner stability. Calm clarity instead of reaction. The mature human no longer reacts instinctively to provocation, praise, or opposition. Reaction belongs to inner instability. Where maturity is present, perception precedes response. Calm clarity does not mean passivity. It means seeing clearly before acting. Such clarity arises from long practice in self-observation and responsibility. The mature individual responds from recognition, not impulse. This calmness unsettles others, not because it dominates, but because it cannot be manipulated. Uprightness without compulsion. Uprightness in maturity is natural, not forced. The mature human does not struggle to appear moral or correct. Integrity flows from alignment with inner conviction. Where immaturity relies on rules to restrain behavior, maturity acts rightly even when unseen. Compulsion disappears because inner law has been recognized and accepted. This uprightness is flexible, not rigid. It bends without breaking, adapts without betraying truth. Why maturity radiates, not argues. Maturity does not convince through debate. It convinces through presence. Truth embodied needs no defense. Those who argue incessantly seek validation. Those who radiate clarity leave space for others to recognize truth themselves. The mature human allows freedom, knowing that truth cannot be forced without distortion. Chapter 12. Independence from approval and fear. The end of crowd thinking. Crowd thinking thrives on fear of exclusion and hunger for approval. Maturity ends this dependence. The mature individual thinks independently while remaining connected, not isolated. This independence is not rebellion. It is inner sovereignty. The mature human listens to others without surrendering inner judgment. Thus, truth is no longer negotiated socially. Freedom from reward and threat. Immaturity responds strongly to reward and threat. Praise inflates, criticism wounds. Maturity transcends both. When reward and threat lose power, action becomes free. The mature individual acts because it is right, not because it is profitable, applauded, or safe. This freedom is deeply unsettling to systems built on control, but it is essential for true human dignity. Standing alone without bitterness. Standing alone is inevitable for those who mature inwardly. Yet maturity carries no bitterness toward those who do not follow. There is no contempt, no superiority, no withdrawal into isolation. The mature human stands alone when necessary, but remains inwardly connected to humanity through understanding rather than resentment. Chapter 13. Service as natural expression. Why the mature human serves without display. Service in maturity is not sacrifice performed for recognition. It is expression, natural and quiet. The mature human serves because capacity seeks use. Just as a healthy tree bears fruit without announcement, maturity contributes without advertisement. Where service is displayed, ego is still active. Contribution instead of ambition. Ambition seeks elevation of self. Contribution seeks fulfillment of need. Maturity shifts orientation from climbing to giving. This does not diminish effectiveness, it enhances it. Contribution aligns with law and therefore bears lasting fruit, while ambition often exhausts itself in rivalry. The quiet power of lawful usefulness. Lawful usefulness is powerful because it harmonizes rather than competes. It strengthens systems without dominating them. The mature human becomes a stabilizing presence, often unnoticed, yet deeply influential. Such influence cannot be replicated by force or charisma. Chapter 14. Authority without domination. Leadership is responsibility, not control. True authority arises from responsibility accepted, not power seized. The mature leader does not seek control, control seeks the immature. Responsibility anchors authority in service. Decisions are made for alignment, not advantage. This kind of leadership inspires trust without demanding loyalty. Why mature beings do not impose. Imposition reveals insecurity. Maturity trusts law and consequence to teach what force cannot. The mature human presents truth clearly, then allows freedom. This respect for autonomy preserves dignity and invites genuine recognition. Influence through example. Example is the highest form of influence. It bypasses resistance and speaks directly to conscience. Mature influence is subtle but enduring. It shapes environment not by command, but by consistency of being. Chapter 15. Why most humans never reach maturity. Comfort, fear, and distraction. Comfort dulls urgency. Fear paralyzes inquiry. Distraction fragments attention. Together, they prevent sustained inner work. Maturity requires discomfort. The discomfort of self-examination, responsibility, and standing apart from the familiar. Refusal to self-examine. Self-examination threatens ego. Many prefer certainty over truth, identity over correction. Without self-examination, errors become identities and habits become prisons. Growth halts long before maturity can emerge. The cost of remaining inwardly adolescent. Inward adolescence manifests as reactivity, blame, comparison, and craving for validation. Societies dominated by such states become unstable, loud, and directionless. The cost is collective. Leadership without wisdom, freedom without responsibility, and progress without alignment. Maturity is rare because it demands honesty, courage, and sustained alignment with law. Yet where it appears, it restores dignity to human life. It is not an end, but a foundation, upon which true freedom, responsibility, and service can stand. Part 4. Decline or ripening. The critical turning point. Every human life reaches a decisive threshold where further earthly expansion is no longer the aim. This phase is commonly feared, denied, or disguised, yet it is neither accidental nor cruel. It is lawful. It is the point where inner development is tested for completeness. What follows is not automatically decline. It is either ripening or hardening. The difference lies not in years, but in inner readiness. Chapter 16. Aging, decay or completion. Why the body weakens while the soul should strengthen. The weakening of the body is not failure, it is design. The body is an instrument meant to serve development, not dominate identity. As its strength diminishes, the soul is meant to stand more clearly on its own. Where the soul has been cultivated, aging brings clarity, detachment, and calm authority. Where the soul has been neglected, aging brings fear, bitterness, and clinging. The tragedy lies not in bodily decline, but in inner emptiness revealed by it. The tragedy of late awakening. Many awaken only when time has narrowed their options. This awakening is painful, not because it is wrong, but because it comes late. Late awakening often carries regret, not for missed pleasures, but for avoided responsibility. Yet even late recognition holds value if it leads to honesty rather than despair. However, awakening without correction remains incomplete. Recognition must still translate into alignment. Ripening versus hardening. Ripening softens without weakening. It brings depth, patience, and quiet strength. Hardening stiffens without strengthening. It brings rigidity, judgment, and fear of change. Ripening accepts transition. Hardening resists it. The same years produce wisdom in one and resentment in another. Time reveals inner condition, it does not create it. Chapter 17. The danger of clinging. Youth worship and denial of transition. Modern culture idolizes youth because it fears responsibility and limitation. This worship is not vitality, it is avoidance. Clinging to youth denies the lawful rhythm of life. It traps individuals in imitation rather than completion, forcing them to perform roles no longer aligned with their phase. Such denial fractures dignity. Fear of irrelevance. Fear of irrelevance arises when worth has been measured by visibility, productivity, or admiration. When these fade, panic follows. True relevance lies in inner clarity, not external demand. The mature presence of a ripened human stabilizes environments even when unseen. Those who know their inner worth do not fear stepping back. Why clinging accelerates decay? Clinging drains energy. It pulls attention backward and outward instead of inward and forward. Resistance to transition accelerates psychological and even physical decline because it fights law instead of cooperating with it. What is resisted deteriorates faster. Acceptance conserves strength. Clinging wastes it. Chapter 18. Reviewing one's life lawfully. Honest inner accounting. This phase calls for review, not confession to others, but honesty with oneself. What was unfolded? What was neglected? What remains unresolved? This accounting must be factual, not emotional. Excuses dissolve here. Self-pity is useless. Only recognition matters. No judges needed. There is no external judge required. Law itself reveals alignment or distortion through inner clarity or unrest. Where peace is present, alignment exists. Where unrest persists, something remains unresolved. This is not punishment, it is information. Recognition is liberation. Recognition frees energy bound in denial. It restores dignity even when correction is no longer possible outwardly. The one who recognizes truth inwardly, even late, steps closer to liberation than one who clings proudly to illusion. Recognition does not erase consequences, but it ends deception. Chapter 19. Preparation without anxiety. Why readiness brings peace. Peace does not come from certainty about what follows death, but from alignment in how one has lived. Readiness arises naturally when nothing essential has been postponed. The absence of fear signals completion, not ignorance. Anxiety is the symptom of unfinished inner work. Death prepared through living rightly. Preparation for death is not a ritual, belief, or final act. It is the cumulative result of daily upright living. Every honest decision, every accepted responsibility, every corrected error prepares the ground quietly. Those who live rightly do not need to prepare at the end. The illusion of last-minute salvation. The belief that everything can be corrected at the final moment contradicts law. Character cannot be transformed instantly, it is formed through living. Death does not purify, it reveals. Hoping for last-minute rescue is postponement disguised as faith. Chapter 20. The last phase of earthly responsibility. What must be resolved before departure? Not all external matters can be resolved, but inner distortions must be recognized. Resentments, false self-images, unacknowledged guilt, these weigh heavily. Resolution means clarity, not perfection. The weight of unresolved distortions. Unresolved distortions do not disappear with death. They accompany the soul as burdens, limiting clarity and freedom beyond the earthly realm. Avoidance does not erase, it preserves distortion. What is carried forward determines what can unfold next. Why postponement is fatal. Postponement is the most dangerous habit because it disguises itself as time. Yet time is no longer abundant in this phase. What could be faced earlier with strength now demands courage. Refusal here seals stagnation. Completion does not require drama, only honesty. This phase is not decline but decision. It is the final opportunity to cooperate consciously with life's lawful rhythm. Those who do so depart quietly, without fear, without clinging, and without unfinished inner resistance. Part 5. Death, the most misrepresented event. Neither end nor escape. Death stands at the center of human fear not because it is cruel, but because it exposes truth. It strips away stories, beliefs, titles, and distractions. For this reason, humanity has wrapped death in terror, mysticism, and fantasy, anything to avoid sober recognition. The Grail Message does not soften death with illusion, nor does it harden it with threats. It clarifies it as a lawful transition, exact and impartial, revealing what has truly been lived. Chapter 21. What death actually is. Separation of soul and body. Death is the separation of the soul from its physical instrument. Nothing more, nothing less. The body, formed from earthly substance, returns to the earth. The soul, not of earthly origin, continues its existence. This separation is not accidental. It is the natural conclusion of the body's usefulness. When the instrument can no longer serve development, it is laid aside. There is no violence in this process by law, only transition. Why death is orderly, not violent. Fear imagines death as chaos because humans project their inner unrest onto it. In truth, death follows law as precisely as birth. The violence associated with death arises from resistance, clinging, and fear, not from death itself. Where acceptance and readiness exist, death occurs quietly and without inner turmoil. Law does not destroy, it releases. The body returns, the soul continues. The body dissolves because it belongs to the earth. The soul continues because it does not. Confusing the two has produced centuries of fear and material obsession. When identity is tied to the body, death feels like annihilation. When identity rests in the soul's development, death is simply departure. Chapter 22, Fear-Based Images of Death. Hell, judgment, annihilation. Images of eternal punishment, sudden judgment, or total annihilation did not arise from truth, but from human attempts to control behavior through fear. These images replace responsibility with terror and understanding with obedience. They do not awaken conscience, they paralyze it. Law needs no threats. Psychological control through terror. Fear-based teachings manipulate uncertainty. They exploit humanity's ignorance of law to enforce conformity, submission, or dependence. Such control weakens the individual's capacity for sober recognition. Fear clouds perception and blocks genuine growth. Truth liberates, terror enslaves. Why fear falsifies reality? Fear distorts perception. It exaggerates, dramatizes, and invents. It replaces clarity with imagination. A fearful human cannot recognize law. Thus, fear becomes the greatest obstacle to understanding death as it truly is. Only sobriety restores accuracy. Chapter 23, No Sudden Transformation After Death. Character continues. Death does not change character. What a human has become inwardly continues beyond the body. Kindness does not suddenly arise in the cruel. Clarity does not suddenly appear in the self-deceptive. Avoidance does not suddenly transform into responsibility. Continuity is law. No instant purification. The belief in instant purification after death is comforting but false. Development cannot be skipped. What was avoided remains unresolved. Death removes the stage, not the inner condition. Without the body, excuses fall away, but distortions remain. Purification requires lived correction, not belief. Why death reveals, not corrects. Correction belongs to life, where choices can still be made through action. Death only reveals the outcome of those choices. This revelation is not punishment, it is consequence. Law does not accuse, it reflects. Chapter 24, The Lawful Continuation. Continuity according to inner state. The soul continues where it belongs by its inner condition. Not belief, not affiliation, not intention, but actual development determines continuation. Inner clarity finds clarity. Inner confusion meets confusion. Law matches condition precisely. No favoritism, no exceptions. Law does not recognize titles, prayers, or claims. It responds only to what has been lived. There are no exceptions because exceptions would destroy justice. Equality before law is not cruelty, it is fairness. What one carries within determines where one continues. Why life on earth determines what follows. Earthly life is the field of action. Here, resistance can be faced, habits changed, and responsibility learned. What is not developed here cannot magically appear later. Earthly life prepares, or fails to prepare, the soul for what follows. Thus, life is decisive. Chapter 25, Why Death Exposes Self-Deception. Masks fall away. Social roles, reputations, and performances belong to the earth. They do not accompany the soul. What remains is what was inwardly true, not what was displayed. Pretenses dissolve. Self-justification loses power without an audience. Rationalizations collapse without time pressure or distraction. The soul stands with itself alone. Only what was lived remains. Words fade, intentions fade, appearances fade. Only lived reality remains, what was thought, chosen, and enacted repeatedly. This is why death terrifies the dishonest and calms the upright. Death is not the enemy of life. It is the final mirror of how life was used. Those who lived responsibly do not fear it. Those who avoided recognition tried to bury truth in fear. Part 6. Humanity Today and the Life Cycle. Why these laws now act faster. Humanity stands at a point where the laws governing life's cycle are no longer hidden by distance or delay. What once unfolded slowly now returns swiftly. What was postponed now demands answer. This acceleration is not punishment, nor crisis by chance, it is the lawful response to prolonged avoidance of maturation. The Grail Message clarifies that law has never changed. What has changed is humanity's position within it. The more knowledge, power, and reach humans possess, the less tolerance remains for irresponsibility. Greater capacity demands greater alignment. Chapter 26. Escaping life through distraction. Entertainment, spirituality, ideology. Modern humans flee life not by running away, but by drowning themselves in stimulation. Entertainment fills silence. Spirituality replaces responsibility with comfort. Ideology offers identity without inner work. These are not evil in themselves. They become destructive when used to avoid self-examination. Distraction is the modern narcotic. Avoidance of maturation. Maturation requires stillness, honesty, and discomfort. Distraction removes all three. The human remains occupied but undeveloped, busy without becoming. Such a person ages, accumulates experiences, but does not grow. Life becomes consumption rather than unfolding. Avoidance delays growth, but does not cancel its necessity. Why escapism collapses now? Escapism depends on time and insulation. Today, neither remains. Systems are interconnected, consequences ripple quickly, and inner emptiness becomes impossible to hide. What once distracted now overwhelms. Escapism collapses because law presses closer, not because the world is cruel. Reality cannot be avoided indefinitely. Chapter 27. Delayed growth and collective crisis. Immature adults ruling systems. When individuals fail to mature, they do not remain private problems, they shape institutions. Childlike reactions govern economies. Emotional thinking directs policies. Fear replaces clarity. Thus, systems mirror the immaturity of those within them. The crisis is not technical. It is developmental. Consequences multiplying. Immaturity multiplies consequences because it repeats mistakes without recognition. Instead of correction, blame increases. Instead of responsibility, narratives expand. Law responds proportionally. Repetition invites intensification. What is not learned gently is taught firmly. Humanity facing its own childhood. Humanity now confronts the results of its prolonged adolescence: excess without restraint, power without wisdom, knowledge without maturity. This confrontation is not condemnation. It is opportunity. Maturity remains possible, but only through recognition. Chapter 28. The acceleration of consequences. Why cause and effect return faster? Acceleration occurs because humanity's actions now affect larger systems instantly. A thought expressed becomes movement. A decision multiplies globally. Law responds at the level of impact. Greater reach shortens the distance between cause and effect. No time left for illusion. Illusions require delay. When consequences follow swiftly, illusions shatter. Beliefs unsupported by lived reality collapse under pressure. Pretenses dissolve when results appear quickly. The age of symbolic living ends. Lived truth is demanded. Law becoming visible. Law becomes visible not because it changed, but because humanity can no longer ignore it. Patterns repeat clearly. Outcomes reveal inner causes. Life exposes its structure openly. Those who observe learn. Those who deny suffer confusion. Chapter 29. Separation through readiness. Those who mature versus those who refuse. Separation does not occur through judgment, belief, or ideology, but through inner readiness. Those who accept responsibility adapt. Those who resist grow rigid. Paths diverge naturally. Law does not push, it allows distance to appear. Natural sorting without judgment. Sorting is not moral evaluation. It is resonance. Clarity aligns with clarity. Confusion clusters with confusion. Maturity finds its environment. No one is expelled. Each remains where they belong by inner state. Inner state determines future. Not position, not intention, not words, but inner condition determines direction. What a human carries within decides what they encounter without. This sorting is already occurring. Chapter 30. The call to conscious living. No waiting, no postponement. There is no future moment reserved for becoming conscious. The present is the only point of action. Waiting is avoidance disguised as patience. Life does not pause for readiness, it reveals readiness through demand. Life is examination. Life tests alignment continuously. Every situation asks the same question: are you conscious or reactive? Responsible or evasive? There is no final exam, only constant reflection. Passing is not perfection, but honesty. Every moment decisive. Each thought shapes direction, each choice reinforces condition, each response deepens or distorts alignment. Nothing is neutral, nothing is insignificant. This realization does not burden, it liberates. For the conscious human, life becomes clear, purposeful, and steady. Thus, the present time is not an age of doom, but an age of decision. Law stands openly before humanity. Those who recognize it step forward. Those who deny it meet its weight. Part 7. Liberation from life and death confusion. Returning to simplicity in law. Liberation from confusion does not require new beliefs, hidden knowledge, or dramatic awakenings. Confusion ends where clarity begins, and clarity arises through recognition of law. Life and death become frightening only when misunderstood, exaggerated, or used as emotional instruments. The Grail Message restores simplicity. It removes fear by removing falsity. It replaces fantasy with lawful understanding and thereby returns dignity to living and dying alike. Chapter 31. Letting go of fear and fantasy. Life without drama. Human life has been burdened with unnecessary drama. Every event is inflated into a story, every challenge into a crisis, every transition into tragedy. Drama thrives where understanding is absent. Life, in truth, is sober, orderly, and purposeful. When one understands law, events lose their emotional excess. Joy becomes calm fulfillment. Difficulty becomes instruction. Neither intoxication nor despair is required. Drama fades when recognition begins. Death without terror. Death terrifies only because it has been surrounded by threat images, mystery, and emotional manipulation. In reality, death is no more dramatic than birth. It is a transition governed by order. There is no ambush, no cosmic judgment scene, no arbitrary punishment. There is continuity according to inner condition. Fear dissolves when death is seen as lawful separation, not annihilation or reward ceremony. Peace through understanding. Peace does not come from hoping death will be kind. It comes from knowing how life works. Understanding removes fear more effectively than comfort ever could. When law is known, nothing needs to be imagined. The human who understands does not cling, nor does he flee. Chapter 32. Living each phase fully. Childhood honored. Childhood is not preparation for later worth, it is a valid phase of responsibility and imprint. When childhood is rushed, exploited, or neglected, distortions follow. Honoring childhood means protecting sensitivity, guiding imitation, and allowing unfolding without pressure. What is honored develops cleanly. Growth embraced. Growth is not accumulation of years or achievements, but refinement of inner posture. Growth requires effort, resistance, and choice. To embrace growth is to accept discomfort without resentment and correction without self-pity. Those who embrace growth do not fear change. Maturity fulfilled. Maturity is fulfillment, not dominance. It is inner stability, clarity, and reliability. A mature human no longer seeks validation. He contributes naturally. He stands without needing opposition. This phase is rare only because it is avoided. Death accepted. Death is accepted when life has been lived consciously. Acceptance does not mean longing, it means readiness without anxiety. The human who fulfilled his phases does not cling to the body nor fantasize about departure. He simply completes. Chapter 33. Grounded presence as safeguard. No mysticism required. Truth does not hide in symbolism or secrecy. It operates openly in cause and effect, thought and consequence, action and return. Mysticism distracts where clarity is needed. It replaces observation with imagination. Law requires no interpretation, only attention. No belief systems needed. Belief is unnecessary where recognition is possible. One does not need to believe in gravity to fall. Likewise, The laws of life operate regardless of acceptance. Freedom begins when belief is replaced by understanding. Reality is teacher. Reality teaches continuously. Every encounter reflects an inner condition. Every repetition points to an unlearned lesson. Those who observe learn. Those who dramatize suffer confusion. Grounded presence keeps the human teachable. Chapter 34. Upright living is preparation. Thought, speech, and action aligned. Preparation for death does not begin near the end, it begins in daily alignment. What one thinks shapes inner form. What one speaks reinforces direction. What one does creates destiny. Alignment removes inner division. Nothing postponed. Postponement is the illusion that time is neutral. It is not. What is delayed accumulates weight. Upright living resolves matters as they arise. It does not store unresolved issues for later. Completion is built daily. Nothing feared. Fear disappears when nothing is hidden, denied, or unresolved. The human who lives uprightly does not fear review, whether in life or beyond it. Fear feeds on disorder. Order dissolves fear. Chapter 35. Peace through lawful completion. A life well lived needs no defense. When life has been lived consciously, no explanation is required. No justification is needed. What was lived speaks for itself. Such a life stands quietly complete. Death loses its sting. Death loses its sting not through hope of reward, but through absence of unfinished business. Nothing haunts. Nothing clings. What remains continues naturally. Continuation becomes natural. Continuation is not dramatic transition, it is lawful movement. The human who lived within law recognizes continuity as self-evident. Thus liberation from life and death confusion is not escape, it is return to simplicity. In this simplicity, fear dissolves, fantasy falls away, and life regains its dignity. One lives clearly, completes calmly, and continues without burden. Conclusion. Life is a task, not a story. Life is not a narrative created for entertainment or dramatization. It is a framework of lawful responsibility, a sequence of phases in which each human being is tested, guided, and given the opportunity to unfold according to law. To live as if life were a story is to mistake appearances for reality, to seek significance in drama rather than in understanding. The Grail Message teaches that the purpose of life is the fulfillment of these lawful tasks, not the creation of illusions or the pursuit of fleeting recognition. Birth is responsibility. Birth is not an accident, a reward, or a punishment. Every human arrives with a set of latent qualities and responsibilities that demand acknowledgement and cultivation. The body, the circumstances, and the environment into which one is born are lawful expressions of inner readiness. To ignore birth's responsibility is to deny the very opportunity provided for development. Life begins not as a privilege, but as a duty, the duty to engage consciously, to learn from circumstance, and to take ownership of the unfolding path. Growth is obligation. Growth is not measured by age, possessions, or social standing. It is measured by alignment with law, refinement of perception, and the development of will and understanding. Every thought, word, and action contributes to inner formation. Avoidance, distraction, or indulgence in outward appearances while neglecting inner work is a violation of life's obligation. Growth requires effort, struggle, and conscious choice. To treat growth as optional is to stagnate, and to allow life to pass without development is to waste the very essence of opportunity. Maturity is requirement. Maturity is the rarest human attainment because it demands full alignment with law, responsibility, and recognition of one's true place in the order of life. It is not earned through status, title, or wealth, but through upright conduct, sober judgment, and consistent self-examination. A mature human does not act from fear, pride, or desire for validation. He or she acts from recognition of law and responsibility, serving naturally, contributing without compulsion, and standing unshaken by the opinion or approval of others. Maturity is not a possibility, it is the requirement for lawful living. Death is transition, not verdict. Death is not a punishment, a reward, or an end. It is the lawful transition of consciousness from one phase of existence to the next. The state in which one departs reflects the state in which one has lived. Death reveals, it does not correct, it exposes unresolved distortions and unfulfilled responsibilities. Approaching death with clarity and completion ensures continuity without turmoil. To fear death or to imagine it as verdict is to misunderstand law, to recognize it as transition is to understand life. In sum, life is not a tale to be told, it is a task to be undertaken. Each phase, birth, growth, maturity, and death, carries lawful responsibilities. Success is not measured by stories or accolades, but by alignment, recognition, and conscious fulfillment. The Grail Message guides us to live soberly, act responsibly, and accept every phase as opportunity, understanding that only through conscientious engagement can one move from one stage to the next with clarity, peace, and freedom. Epilogue: the dignity of a completed life. The culmination of human life is not measured by accolades, possessions, or recognition. Its dignity lies in the fulfillment of responsibility, in the conscious alignment of thought, word, and deed with the laws of creation. A completed life is one in which the human being has met each phase, birth, growth, maturity, and transition, with awareness and uprightness. It is marked by sobriety of perception, clarity of action, and the absence of unnecessary attachment or illusion. Quiet departure. The end of earthly existence need not be dramatic, fearful, or laden with emotional chaos. A person who has lived in accordance with law departs quietly, not because life was easy or unchallenged, but because each challenge was met with insight and responsibility. There is no need for external validation or ceremony, the departure itself becomes an expression of inner order and recognition. Quiet departure reflects a life in which priorities were correctly aligned, and the human has fulfilled the tasks laid before them. No clinging, no regret. Clinging arises from misunderstanding, attachment to possessions, reputation, or the illusion of permanence. Regret arises from avoidance, neglect, or denial of responsibility. A life lived lawfully leaves neither. Every experience has been faced, every duty undertaken, and every failure confronted with acknowledgement and correction where possible. There is no fear of loss, no longing for what was, no self-deception to hide from. The mind and heart are at peace because law has been recognized, and no phase of life has been evaded or denied. This freedom from clinging and regret is not sentimental, it is the natural result of understanding and fulfillment. The strength of fulfillment. True strength is not demonstrated through power over others, accumulation of status, or outward recognition. It is the inner power of one who has lived in harmony with law, who has developed faculties of judgment, discernment, and self-mastery. Fulfillment brings a deep, unshakable strength, a clarity that is independent of circumstance, a sovereignty over self that remains intact at all times. A completed life demonstrates that the human being can meet existence without illusion, can accept responsibility without resistance, and can transition from one phase to the next with grace and comprehension. In the end, the dignity of a completed life is a mirror of conscious living. It is earned through sober awareness, alignment with the laws of creation, and the unflinching acknowledgement of responsibility in every moment. Such a life leaves no bitterness, no fear, no unresolved distortions. It stands as proof that life is not a drama to be endured, but a task to be executed, and that fulfillment is the natural and lawful outcome of recognition, clarity, and action in accordance with truth. Appendix: Practical Tools for Lawful Living. The study of life, its cycles, and the lawful principles governing birth, growth, maturity, and death is only meaningful when it is applied. Knowledge without practice produces awareness without effect. The following practical tools provide a framework for living in alignment with law, fostering clarity, responsibility, and inner freedom. Daily self-examination exercises. A conscious human observes their thoughts, words, and deeds. Daily self-examination is essential for uncovering unconscious patterns that distort perception and hinder growth. Practical steps. Morning assessment. Upon waking, review the intentions for the day. Ask, what responsibilities am I undertaking today? Am I approaching them lawfully, without avoidance or bias? Midday reflection. Pause for a brief reflection. Evaluate interactions and decisions made so far. Consider whether actions arise from recognition of law or from ego, habit, or impulse. Evening review. Before rest, note successes, lapses, and areas for correction. Record observations objectively, without self-condemnation, focusing on lawfulness rather than sentiment. This consistent practice strengthens self-awareness, prevents accumulation of unresolved distortions, and cultivates clarity. Practices for conscious growth. Growth is not automatic with time, it is the result of deliberate effort and alignment. Conscious growth requires structured practices. Techniques include mindful observation. Watch thoughts and reactions without judgment. Recognize impulses of pride, envy, fear, or avoidance as indicators of misalignment. Reflection on cause and effect. Examine consequences of actions daily. Seek understanding of how inner states shape outer circumstances. Corrective action. Where misalignment is noted, consciously act to rectify it. Small corrections applied consistently are more effective than sporadic grand gestures. These exercises cultivate inner discipline, sharpen judgment, and reinforce lawful living. Reflection on responsibility at each life phase. Life unfolds in phases: birth, growth, maturity, decline, and transition. Each phase carries specific responsibilities. Childhood. Learning responsiveness and imprinting lawful habits. Growth. Refinement of will, alignment with inner law, and conscious decision-making. Maturity. Upholding responsibility without attachment to recognition or reward. Decline. Reviewing accomplishments, resolving distortions, preparing for transition. Reflecting on responsibilities inherent to each stage allows humans to measure progress and correct deviations before they become entrenched. Grounding routines for clarity and sobriety. Inner clarity is maintained through routines that prevent drift into habitual misperception or distraction. Recommended practices. Daily pause. Set aside time for silence or focused attention to inner law and principles. Physical grounding. Engage in simple movements or breathing exercises to connect awareness with the present moment. Environmental awareness. Maintain an orderly, uncluttered space to mirror inner alignment. Grounding strengthens self-possession, reduces susceptibility to reactive behavior, and reinforces sober judgment. Weekly review for alignment with creation's law. A structured weekly review consolidates daily efforts and ensures continuity. Steps. Evaluate alignment. Assess decisions and behaviors over the week. Did actions reflect recognition of law? Identify patterns. Detect recurring misalignments or avoidance tendencies. Plan correction. Strategically address deviations in the upcoming week. Record progress. Maintain a log or journal for accountability, observation, and reflection. Weekly review reinforces consistent lawfulness, enables foresight, and deepens understanding of cause and effect. In summary, the practical tools outlined above are not rituals or superstitions, they are deliberate applications of recognition and alignment. Their consistent use strengthens clarity, deepens responsibility, and ensures that the human life, in all its phases, is lived as a conscious, lawful task rather than as a sequence of accidental events or emotional dramas.